So, you've heard of a funny little mod pack called GTNH. Whoa. Okay. Those were some pretty sweet bases, guys. Certainly far beyond my reach right now. But, how do we actually get there? And, for that matter, what even is there? Well, kind stranger, we'll get to that in just a moment. But for now, we have more pressing matters to attend to. As they say, the early bird gets the worm, and I better be hauling ass before nightfall if I ever hope to live to see tomorrow. In that case, let's get going, shall we? G'day everyone, I'm Relico and welcome to the very first episode of my new series on GregTech New Horizons. For those of you who don't know, GTNH is one of the hardest, most well-balanced expert mod packs out there, in my opinion, blending tech and magic mods into a seamless progression that's as rewarding as it is challenging. This series is going to be a deep dive into the mod pack and I'm super excited to share this journey with you all. I'll be playing on version 2.7, which is actually the anniversary update recently dropped to celebrate 10 years of GTNH. If you're curious about what's new in this update, I highly recommend checking out Edit Year's video on the subject. Sorry if I butchered the name. He does a fantastic job, actually, of breaking it all down, so I'll be leaving the link to that in the description below. But before we dive in, let me give you a quick overview of what to expect in this series. It's mainly going to be a mix of progression highlights, building tips, and some personal challenges I'll be setting for myself along the way. I'll also be sharing some of my favourite strategies for tackling early game, which can be pretty brutal if you're not prepared. Now, down to business. Let's talk about how I'll be playing this run. So, this isn't a challenge run. Cue disappointed sighs. I'll be playing what you might call vanilla GTNH, meaning I'll basically be following the mod pack as intended. That being said though, I'm leaning towards a tech-focused playthrough, so don't expect to see me diving into bees or blood magic meteors anytime soon. Magic lovers, I hear you weeping. I might dabble in magic later on, to be honest. There's some really nice things from Thaumcraft that I just can't live without, but for now, it's all about the machines. One thing I want to mention up front too is that I won't be using /home as an easy means of transport. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the command. I think in my last run I had upwards of like 60 homes, and that was even before the mid-game. Maybe a little bit excessive. But while it's a handy command, I feel like it takes away from the survival experience, especially in a mod pack as immersive as GTNH. Instead, I'll be relying on good old-fashioned travel and eventually setting up proper transportation systems like rails or teleporters later in the game. It's going to make exploration and resource gathering a bit more challenging, but I think it'll also make this journey more rewarding. Specifically, I've always been the one to use home commands as an easy means of traveling to planets, right? And I think it really takes away from the potential. You know, if I am ready to go to the moon, I have to gather everything together. I have to get an oxygen collector, like a bubble distributor. And I think we could make something really cool out of a proper moon base. So we'll see where that takes us. Another big focus for this series is building. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a master builder by any means, but I've picked up a lot of tips and tricks over the years, and I'm excited to share what I've learned with you. My goal is to make my base not just functional, but also aesthetically pleasing. Along the way, I'll post some guides on how to build in GTNH, covering everything from basic layouts to more advanced decorative techniques. If you're like me and don't consider yourself a natural builder, don't worry, we're in this together and we'll figure it out. That being said, I'll also be focusing on automation as much as possible. GTNH is, after all about efficiency, and automating your processes early on can save you a ton of time and a ton of resources in the long run. So, expect to see some creative setups and maybe even a few fails as I figure things out. Now, onto the series as a whole. Since GTNH is such a massive mod pack with tons of content, my episodes will focus on highlights of my progression. I'll cover things like easy power generation methods for early game, material collection, and automated setups. If you're looking for more in-depth guides on how to start in GTNH, I highly recommend Geronimo's videos. They are incredibly detailed and a fantastic resource for beginners. I'll be leaving a link to those below. That being said, I'll still be going into a fair amount of detail in these videos. This certainly isn't my first rodeo in GTNH, and as I've completed the pack, I like to think I know a fair amount. So if you're new to GTNH, or just looking for some tips, you should find plenty of useful info here. And if you're a seasoned GTNH player, I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments. There's always more to learn in this mod pack. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. So, of course, we're starting in the Stone Age, and my first priority is always to find a bed. In GTNH, mobs are absolutely brutal, and especially in the early game, they will destroy you. Being able to skip the night isn't just a convenience, it's a necessity. It means more productive uptime and way fewer deaths. My pro tip, beds are super easy to find if you locate a brick house dungeon. These structures always have a bed, and the bricks are incredibly useful for your early Stone and Steam Age needs. Once I've secured a bed, my next objectives are food and a starter home. This is where your best friend in GTNH comes into play, the questbook. The questbook is your ultimate early game guide, and while it's not perfect, sometimes the info can be a bit outdated, it's an invaluable tool for navigating the mod pack. Early on, the food rewards from quests are a lifesaver, so make sure to collect as many as you can. The coins you earn are also super useful, as they unlock the coin shop, which has a selection of helpful items. And if you're feeling lucky, go ahead and open up those loot bags. There's a chance for some pretty sweet early game rewards, and you really don't need to worry about saving them until later. Now, when you're picking a spot for your starter base, you might be thinking, where the hell do I live? Do I just choose the prettiest biome? Do I choose that massive mountain in the distance that's totally a good idea to spend the next 6 hours digging out? Don't worry, I think we've all been there. Maybe you think, oh, I can just live underground. To be honest, there's plenty of options to choose from, and I would argue that picking a nice looking biome is absolutely a positive. But there is something that you simply must pay attention to: humidity. Water is one of your most valuable resources early on, and your first source of it, usually the water tank, scales its output based on humidity. Additionally, the new water pump multi-block that was added does the same thing. Ideally, you want to set up in a biome with at least 50% humidity. To be honest, if you're already committed to a biome that has under 50%, say 20%, 30%, realistically, you're probably going to be okay. All it usually means is you might be making more water tanks, or you might be upgrading to the water pump. You can check the humidity level in the top left corner of your screen, along with other handy info like whether you're standing over an ore vein. Other early game resources to keep an eye out for include slime islands, which are a great source of rubber from the saplings, and sand, gravel, and clay, which you'll be needing in large quantities. Trust me. If you find a slime island, make sure to grab the saplings. They'll come in handy later. Another thing to consider when choosing a location is access to resources. You want to be relatively close to a variety of biomes, as different resources are found in different areas. For example, you'll need a lot of sand and clay early on, so being near a desert or river biome can be a big help. Well, strange traveller, you've got yourself some shelter, maybe even a bed, maybe even a steady food supply. Now, it's time to start thinking about your next steps. First up, prospecting for nearby ore veins. Copper, iron, tin, redstone, diamonds, they're your top priorities early on, but don't stress if you can't mine them yet. A bit of questbook progression will get you your first decent pickaxe, and from there, it's relatively smooth sailing. Next up, you'll want to focus on base expansion, storage, and a bit of farming. As you explore, keep an eye out for biomes of plenty gardens and cotton. The gardens are crucial for the Healing Axe quest, and cotton is needed for an important early game quest. Speaking of storage, things can get messy fast. Trust me, they will. So I recommend setting up a basic chest wall to keep everything organized. Now, let's talk about the Healing Axe. This is one of the best early game tools you can get, as it lets you refill your saturation just by holding it. It's truly a game changer, especially once you start using Tinker's tools for vein mining trees and 3x3 mining of sand and ores. The Healing Axe is particularly useful for tackling rainforest oak trees, which drop a ton of wood and are a great early game resource. One of the questions I see constantly in the Discord is what type of tree to use, and I'll be showing you guys my method with using rainforest oak trees. I say method, it's not terribly difficult. A simple crafting recipe, a simple lumber axe, and ideally the Healing Axe, and you are totally set on wood. And I mean drawers and drawers and drawers full. So I'll be showing you that soon. As you progress in GTNH, you want to start expanding your base to accommodate more machines and more storage. Don't worry about doing this too early on, it might be a bit overwhelming, but flint tools, they can get a job done. One of the first things I like to do is set up a workshop area where I can keep all my tools and crafting stations organized. This makes it much easier to find what you need and when you need it. It also helps to keep your base looking neat and tidy. One thing I like to do particularly is keep storage and crafting in a centralized location. I really like to keep my chests basically next to where I'm crafting, if not connected to a Tinker's workstation, as it lets you directly access the chest inventory and is mighty invaluable. One easy thing you can do is upgrade the chest through the tiers, so iron, copper, gold, diamond, etc. And the increased storage size is also able to be used with a Tinker's workstation. This makes early game crafting incredibly easier and removes a lot of the tedium. Another important early game project is setting up farms. You'll need a steady supply of food and a steady supply of cotton. And if you're not afraid, you can get into a little bit of IC2 crop breeding, but we'll get to that in another episode. I like to start herding animals as well. You're going to need tons of leather. You can also farm chickens for a flight potion. and it'll also be a source of eggs and milk. And that's it for the first few days in GTNH. Again, if you're looking for more in-depth guides on early game strategies, be sure to check out the links in the description. And if you want to see the more grindy parts of the run, follow me on Twitch and join the Discord. I'll be streaming regularly and I'd love to have you along for the journey. On my streams, I'll be chatting and sharing advice as I play, typically going into more intimate detail about what I'm doing and why. Whether it's explaining my thought process behind a particular build, troubleshooting a tricky automation setup, or just sharing tips for surviving GTNH's brutal early game, I'll be there to answer your questions and help out however I can. If you're new to GTNH or just looking for some guidance, feel free to drop by and ask anything. I'm really looking forward to helping out new followers and building a community around this amazing mod pack. In the next episode, we'll hopefully be moving into the Steam Age, solidifying our base, herding some animals, and getting our farming game on. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to show you how things progress. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.